And we're talking about the corruption of the Russia investigation. Didn't Papadopoulos get arrested? Didn't Manafort get arrested? That proves it. That proves. All right. So that's enough Fauci for an evening. Let's turn our direction to the other executive stooge that's so bad. Merrick Garland. Ooh, I'm getting my phone's blowing up here. My friend's funny. Merrick Garland testified today. There's all sorts of interesting things. Hell, it'd probably be worth to go through the whole exchange, everything he talked about. But there is one thing particular that I think's worth bringing up. Now let's see if I can find the exchange here. First, there's this. This story just kept growing all day. This is incredible. So Merrick Garland's going to be asked, for those that didn't know, you had the National School Board Association sent a letter to the Biden administration, and that letter suggested, and we'll go through parts of that letter, suggested that parents showing up at school board meetings were likened to domestic terrorists, and perhaps they should be dealt with the Patriot Act or a similar mechanism. Of course, the fact checker said, no, they didn't say they were domestic terrorists. They likened them to domestic terrorists and said they should be treated with the Patriot Act. But the fact checker said that was false. It was false to suggest that. Even though we have the document right for, don't believe your lying eyes. Again, that's what you see from our propagandist media. And so, that letter cited very few evidence. They just said, there's threats from school boards and it's domestic terrorism. And then, after that letter, a few short days, Merrick Garland, the head of the DOJ, the Attorney General, came out and said, we will be having the FBI work with school boards and local law enforcement to deal with this threat. In other words, we're treating parents that are angry at school boards that are doing multiple things, but the most of which is teaching racist, garbage, critical race theory in schools and sexualization and stuff that's being inappropriate. We're going to treat those parents that are concerned about their children's education as domestic terrorists. Incidentally, a disproportionate amount of the people that are talking are actually minority people, in particular immigrants. Because there were a lot of immigrants speaking at these school board meetings going, we came here for a big reason, education opportunities for our children. We don't want them indoctrinated with this BS. Thank you so much, Ripplin, for the follow. I really appreciate it. And yet, the message was loud and clear. We are going to look to see if these people are potential domestic terrorists. Thanks for the follow. I have a feeling I just got botted. Would be my guess. Let's see here. Ripplin's not a bot. Maybe not. Maybe I just got lucky and just got some followers. Well, thank you. I apologize, OmniLux, too. Big, I'm not going to say the rest of your name. Thank you. Ripplin, thank you. Omni, thank you. I just thought because Big's name there, that looked like a troll. It's probably a troll with that name. Thank you, Ripplin. I appreciate the follow. Even if you dislike me, I still appreciate the follow. So the message was loud and clear. Now think of the things that the FBI... DW, thank you so much for the Pavarotti of Inner Zone Common Sense. Thank you. I just watched the Seinfeld with Pavarotti, Domingo, and the other guy, right? At the poster. Thank you so much. Credible donation, $20. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sorry, Omni. How dare... I'm so sorry I accused you of being a bot. It happens to me a lot, though. What does it mean to be botted? Somehow people could use... they could kind of hack the system or use some sort of program that I just get like 100 followers, and so it'll just keep going beep, 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 beep. And then they can... Supposedly those bots are dangerous because they could like send metadata or something to places. So you got to try to get rid of the bots when they come in. But I used to have a podcast. We'll see. That might be something I get into. I got to work too many damn hours. This week I'm already up to like 80. I'm close to 100 hours this week. I'm at 90, I think now. And I work until 4 o'clock tomorrow. So, yeah, we'll all be bots one day. So, anyways, what was I talking about before I got in the bot discussion? We're talking about Merrick Garland. So, yeah, think of the things that the FBI has not tried. For example, the head of the FBI was like, Antifa's just an idea. Now, they took over 6 city blocks in Seattle. Them and people of BLM. 6 city blocks they took over. They were extorting businesses. There were alleged rapes that were occurring there. The police were not allowed in. The mayor of Seattle said it was the summer of love. And then we have the audio of them executing an African-American teenager and shooting another one. We have the audio of it, which I can't even play if I could find it, which it's hard to find now. But I heard the audio, but you can't play it because TOS anyways. Where they said he's still alive or still breathing or something like that. Pap, pap, pap. And shot him 3 more times. And the FBI said, we can't get involved in that. Now, parents at school board meetings, the FBI's on it. We're on it. People burning down city after city, police precincts and stuff like that, protesting for George Floyd. FBI can't be involved in that. They can't get involved in that. Is it white supremacy? No, we can't get involved in that. But parents at school board meetings, we can get involved. So anyways, this letter was sent from the National School Board Association prompting Merrick Garland to come out and say, yeah, we're going to have the FBI collaborate, and people were pissed off, as they should be. And the reason, and I told you, the reason is because with the radical left and with the establishment, they understand that one of the best mechanisms for control is indoctrinating our children. And so when you're over the target is when they'll fight the hardest. That's why they're constantly fighting, saying, we need to get disinformation off social media. They don't really mean that because we could see disinformation that benefits the establishment all the time. For example, Joe Biden at one point said, millions of people have died for COVID in the United States. That was disinformation, wasn't censored. Joe Biden claimed his reason for entering the race was he heard Trump say Nazis were good people. That never happened. That was disinformation. That lie was repeated over and over again. Constant disinformation, yet we don't see a big push to censor it. The Facebook whistleblower wasn't concerned about disinformation directed at Trump. Lie after lie after lie by mainstream sources that was freely allowed to be on social media that not one Democrat said, this is terrible disinformation spreading, it's killing our democracy. Nope, what they mean by disinformation is stories that they don't want published because it hurts them. Why are they so passionate on going after that? Because they understand the only way that they can continue to maintain control is to control the narrative, because their policies and their ideas are so bad, the only way they could get away with it is to control how the conversation is going. It's the exact same with the indoctrination of children. That's why they reacted so viscerally. Oh, you can't do that. Send in the FBI. And I told you even before that one of the optimist things I had in this country was particularly so many moms showing up at these school board meetings saying, enough is enough. That gives me hope for the future. Meanwhile, people like Terry McAuliffe, running for governor of Virginia, says he hates that. Parents shouldn't be involved in their children's education. He says should be up to the parents. They shouldn't have a say in it. That's what he says. That's the Democrat position. And I've talked to you about the teachers union as how they're one of the most racist, horrible organizations. Literally, the teachers unions fought and succeeded in locking down schools, which every developed nation in the country showed over and over and over was child abuse. That was bad not just for the children's education, but for their health and for their emotional well-being. And yet, the teachers unions pushed for it because it benefited them economically and politically. That's how disgusting they are. But that's a little tangent. So, that's why they're treating you like a domestic terrorist if you're concerned about your child being indoctrinated. That's why they say you shouldn't have any say in your child's education. Yeah, right. Amielek says, China's weaponizing space. Biden's focused on parents at school boards. That's right. Destroying the country from within is far easier and more significant than from without. Nonetheless, Merrick Garland testifies today. Okay? So he's going to be asked. Now, if you've been following the news, you've seen that there was a story that came out of Loudoun County, Virginia. And it was a story I remember hearing back in June that I heard a couple panels I was on. I remember people discussing, making fun of this guy. I believe his name was Scott Smith. I could be wrong about the name. He was a guy, didn't look like the most in-shape guy in the world. And he looked absolutely pathetic because he was sort of screaming and his shirt was kind of pulled up and he was being arrested. He was being drug out. Oh, that was, see? And there was news articles saying, see how violent these are getting? This gentleman got arrested. He was drug out. He was shouting profanities. That guy went quiet for a while. We didn't hear from him. And now we know the story. We know what that guy was yelling about. You know what he was yelling about? A transgender student, a biological male, entered the girls' restroom and forcibly raped and sodomized this man's daughter. And the school board covered it up. Now I'm not a violent person. But I think if that happened to my daughter, me shouting words at a school board would be the least of their concerns. And I think that would be understandable for almost anyone. The story's heinous. It's horrible. Now, I want you to hear when Merrick Garland's asked by Jim Jordan today. I want you to hear what his response, only 50 seconds. Let's hear what he says when asked about it.
First sentence of your memo, very first sentence, you said, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
When did you first review the data showing this so-called...
I'm sorry, this clip's different. This is important. This is an important precursor to that, right? What Jim Jordan's asking here is because we were told, and I asked this question, I asked it in my channel, I said, where's the data? Okay, there's a rise in domestic terrorism or domestic terrorist-like act. I talked about it on this show. I said, someone show me the data. That's funny. That seems like something that you would hear a lot of news reports about. For God's sakes, if a Trump reporter allegedly puts a noose around a celebrity's neck while he's getting Subway sandwiches at 3 a.m., that's all we hear about. Oh, these shitty Trump supporters. White supremacy, they're so bad. Every damn race hoax gets reported. Oh my God, they can't wait to report it. There's a noose hanging up in Bubba Wallace's garage stall. All of these media outlets, you know, they're chomping at the bit for the story. Oh my God, domestic terrorism? Parents using terrorism against school board members? Where are the reports? I didn't see them. And yet the FBI is saying, oh my God, this is a serious situation. Okay, where's the data? I noticed in the FBI's memo, they didn't cite where their data was. And I said that. I said, can someone show me? I could think of 4 or 5 cases where people have been arrested for shouting or for yelling at school board members, or maybe they were being rude. But have there been cases where school board members have been physically assaulted? Their houses have been broken into? If so, I strongly condemn that. But if it's only happening 2 or 3 times, why is the FBI getting involved? Local law enforcement can't handle that? That's the question I asked. And so Jim Jordan asked the question to Merrick Garland. Okay, you said that this is apparently so out of control that the FBI needs to get involved. Not your local... Think about it. If there was a protest at my local school board meeting here, and one guy got out of hand and charged the school board and threw a punch, even though our local police print is very small, more than capable of handling it. More than capable. So the only reason that outside help would need to be brought in is if it's crazy. Dozens of people were beating the shit out of school board members, or they were involved in some crazy plot that was being developed. But I don't see any of that. Where's the evidence for that? The best I could see is, well, there was some unruly people shouting at a school board and they had to shut the meeting down early. One guy got arrested for yelling obscenities. So where's the evidence? So Jim Jordan's going to ask Merrick Garland here, when you issued this decree that the FBI was getting involved, what evidence were you looking at? Let's see what Merrick Garland says.
First sentence of your memo, very first sentence, you said, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
When did you first review the data showing this so-called disturbing uptick?
So I read the letter, and we have been seeing over time threats.
Whoa. I didn't ask you. So you read the letter. That's your source?
So let me be clear. This is not a prosecution or an investigation.
Is there some study, some effort, some investigation someone did that said there's been a disturbing uptick, or you just take the words of the National School Board Association?
Well, the National School Board Association, which represents thousands of school boards and school board members, says that there are these kind of threats. When we read in the newspapers reports of threats of violence, when that is in the context of threats of violence.
The source for this, for the very first line in your memo.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Was the School Boards Association letter.
Expired, Mr. Deutsch.
First sentence of your memo, very first sentence, you said, in recent months there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
The reason for the FBI getting involved is because there's been an increase. The data shows there's been an increase in violence and intimidation of school board members. Now, you would think, oh, the FBI did some report. They have a data set of this. No! Where did they get the information? Newspaper articles and the School Board Association's letter. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's where you got your data. That would be like if the NRA came out and said, we're writing a letter to the White House that says there's a rash of terrorist threats against us in the NRA, violence and intimidation. And Biden's administration says, that's it, we got the FBI. Anybody that's going to be looking at organizations protesting the NRA. And you'd say, oh, wow, can we see the data? Well, the NRA's letter. That's our data. Is it any surprise that the same administration that was influenced to lock down children, to force children to be vaccinated, to force children to be masked, despite the fact that every other industrialized nation didn't do that? And we now know that the reason that this administration was doing it was because right before they switched their position to do that shit, the national teachers unions were contacting them and mailing them. Oh, I'm sorry. In fact, the Biden administration's head of the CDC came out and said lockdowns are no good, like in March, and then was emailed by the National Teacher Association, the biggest national teachers union, and then 2 days later came out and was like, oh, okay, we are going to lock down. So when it comes to health decisions for our children, the Biden administration is making their decision not based on the scientists, not based on the data. If it was based on the science and the data, why would they be different than every other industrialized nation? All of Europe, for example. Nope, instead, they're listening to the teachers union. When it comes to getting the FBI to investigate Americans, possibly using Patriot Act tools, are they citing data from the FBI that they've compiled, studies? Nope, they're citing newspaper articles and the National School Board Association's letter. You don't think the National School Board Association, that's designed, I don't care if it's nonprofit or not, to protect the school board, you don't think they're going to have a view on this? For example, you could take any court case. You got one person on one side, plaintiff and defendant. Both of them are going to say, paint the other side in the worst possible light. They're clearly biased. So why would you get the FBI in going after parents based merely on, well, we just trusted that they knew what they were talking about? What good is the FBI? They're not investigating? That's what the FBI is now? It's the personal tool of anyone that has enough lobbying power to say, oh, we're being threatened. We don't have to provide proof. We just say we're being threatened. The FBI is not going to look into that. They'll just say, oh, okay, you're being threatened, then we'll step in. By the way, the story broke later in the day that some people at the National School Board Association were pissed off because they thought the language that was calling parents terrorists was too much, and that was saying things about we should use the Patriot Act was too much. And it turned out that that letter was written in conjunction with the White House. So the Biden White House knows that this letter is being crafted by the National School Board Association. The National School Board Association works with the White House in framing it and creating it. And then the Department of Justice says, oh, we're weaponizing the FBI based on the National School Board Association's claims that they worked in conjunction with the White House with. Not actual data. Just like with, and there's precedent for this. Go back and read the FISA warrants on Carter Page. What was the evidence that was cited in the FISA warrant for Carter Page? The Steele dossier. Remember? But then there was something, what backed up the Steele? Does anyone remember? I don't know if people remember this other than me. What backed backed up the Steele dossier? What was cited? Because they admitted, even Comey admitted, we never verified the claims in the dossier. In fact, after they renewed the warrant twice, they talked to the primary subsource, a known Russian spy, and he said it was all bullshit. He couldn't believe that they were using that to wiretap a Trump associate. He was like, it was just bar talk. But who backed up? Who did they didn't say, the FBI didn't say, oh, and we researched and found this to be true, that's why we're using it for a... Nope, they didn't do that. They didn't say the CIA looked at it. Nope, they didn't do that. Who was the organization that backed it up? Does anyone remember? Steele dossier claims. And they said, oh, we didn't verify. No, it wasn't Fusion GPS. It might be, I don't know if people remember this. It was Jason Isikoff at Yahoo News. Remember? Steele said this. Steele made these claims. Also, this was independently corroborated by news articles from Jason Isikoff at Yahoo News. Excuse me? So the FBI didn't confirm what Steele was saying, but Yahoo News did? Yahoo News! You're citing Yahoo News to violate someone's rights to spy on them and get a warrant on them. Or Michael Isikoff, I'm sorry, yeah. You're right. See, Bandit's on it. Let me ask you this, Bandit. It later came out. How did Michael Isikoff confirm the details of the Steele dossier? Who was his source to confirm it? You remember? You remember, Bandit? Does anyone else remember? They said, oh, here are these claims in the Steele dossier. And we didn't confirm whether or not they're true or not, but Michael Isikoff did at Yahoo News. Bandit's right. Michael Isikoff's source was Christopher Steele. Let me repeat that. Christopher Steele makes claims. The FBI says we couldn't confirm these claims, but Yahoo News did. And then we find out Yahoo News is like, yeah, we just talked to Christopher Steele. So Christopher Steele was confirming Christopher Steele's reporting. There was literally no one outside that loop. He just fed information to a news outlet that the FBI then said, oh, the news outlet reported it, so it must be true. But really, it was just Christopher Steele. Thank you, DW. I could carry 3 hours of radio. I used to have a 2-hour radio show. Now we have... So that shit flew. That flew. No consequences. That was enough to get a wiretap on the President of the United States campaign and then his administration. And no one seemed to give a shit. Oh, well. Now what do we have? Well, we're weaponizing the FBI to go after parents. Why? Well, because the National School Board Association says that there's a bunch of terroristic threats and threats of violence going on against school boards. How did they come up with this? Well, they were working with the White House. And newspapers reported it. Are you shitting me? Do you trust the papers? If you're on the left and you're like, well, it sounds good to me. Okay, let's say, how would you feel if Trump or let's say DeSantis wins in 2024? And Tucker Carlson has a big episode one night, and it's like, rabid left-wingers are intentionally bringing illegal immigrants in, and they're issuing threats against Republican congresspeople. And so DeSantis' attorney general comes out and says, well then, anyone who's protesting Republicans, we're going to have the FBI mobilized to look into this. Because the data shows Republican lawmakers are under violent terroristic threat. So Black Lives Matter or Antifa or Democratic groups, MoveOn.org, all them, we're going to investigate all of them. We're going to work with local law enforcement to make sure anytime there's a rally against Republicans that the FBI is in conjunction. And then the Attorney General for DeSantis is hauled in front of Congress and they say, well, where's this data? Where's this data? And he says, Tucker Carlson. There was a news story about it. We saw Tucker Carlson say it. Would you be comfortable with that? Would the left be comfortable with that? Oh, okay. Well, if Tucker Carlson said it. If newspapers, if the Washington Examiner says it, if the New York Post says it, or other outlets that lean right-wing, well then fair enough. You mean the same newspapers that have put bullshit after bullshit and fake story after fake story and been wrong so many times? That's why we're weaponizing the FBI against school parents? I gotta grab a drink. Oh boy, let's do it. Let's get wild. Now, that's not even the end of the story, believe it or not. That's shocking. Those two, one, we found out today that Merrick Garland, the data that shows the massive violence and terroristic threats against school boards doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Instead, they're relying on the letter from the National School Board Association and newspapers. That's it. So that's enough to weaponize the FBI. You might say, okay, well, maybe the Biden administration is just looser. Maybe they're more willing to get the FBI involved anytime that there's any sort of big thing, even if there's not data. They mobilizing against Antifa? No, that's just an idea. That's just an idea. You see? Just an idea. They dealing with the people that attacked Rand Paul? Nope. They're not on that. That's local shit. But oh boy, parents that are concerned about what their children are being taught, they're on it. The FBI's on it. But it gets worse. All right? This story, oh my God. I thought the Fauci story had me fired up. Now, back to what we were talking about that gentleman, Scott Smith, I think was his name. The guy whose daughter was raped and sodomized by a trans student in the girls' bathroom. A story that was covered up by the school board and the teachers because it was worth that girl not getting justice and her rape being covered up. Because if they told the truth, it might hurt their narrative on trans students. In reality, it wouldn't. If I was trans, I wouldn't say, oh, well, no one that's trans could ever do anything bad. Of course not. Just tell the truth. Okay, this one trans person did something horrible. That doesn't impugn everyone that's trans. But when you cover this shit up, you're literally covering up the rape of underage girls. Can you think of anything more monstrous? What order do I want to do this in? Let's look at the letter from the National School Board Association. Let's go through it, shall we? Here's the letter that was sent. Only a few days before Merrick Garland responded. Oh boy, yeah. Now we now know that this letter was crafted with the knowledge of the White House. The Biden administration, okay? September 29th. To Joe Biden. So they're consulting with Biden's White House and then they act like they're writing it to Biden. When it looks like the Biden administration probably knew exactly what was being crafted. And I remind you, some members of the National School Board Association thought that this letter was far too extreme. We're going to go through it fast. America's public schools and its education leaders are under immediate threat. The National School Board Association respectfully asks for federal law enforcement and other assistance to deal with the growing number of threats and violence and acts of intimidation occurring across the nation. Local school board members want to hear from their communities on important issues that must be the forefront of good school board governance and promote free speech. However, there also needs to be safeguards in place to protect public schools and dedicated education leaders as they do their job. The National School Board Association believes immediate assistance is required to protect our students, school board members, and educators who are susceptible to acts of violence and interstate commerce because of threats to their districts, families, and personal safety. As our school boards continue coronavirus recovery operations within the respective districts, they're also persevering against other challenges that could impede the progress in a number of communities. Coupled with the attacks against school board members and educators for approving policies for masks and protect health and safety of students and school employees, many public school officials are facing physical threats because of the propaganda purporting that the false inclusion of critical race theory within the classroom instruction and curricula. It's not true. It's not false. There is critical race theory being taught. This propaganda continues despite the fact that critical race theory is not taught in public schools. That's not true. We see that it is. The largest teachers union even came out and admitted that it was and defended that. And remains a complex law school and graduate school subject beyond the scope. On behalf of our state association and more than 90,000 school board members who govern our country's 14,000 local public school districts, educating more than 50 million school children, NSBA appreciates your leadership to end the proliferation of COVID-19 in our communities and our school districts. We also appreciate the recent discussions with the White House and U.S. Department of Education staff on many critical issues facing public schools, including threats that officials are receiving. In addition, we applaud your actions to restore resources in our school districts that have not yet received education stabilization through Project STAFE. Now we ask that the federal government investigate, intercept, and prevent the current threats and acts of violence against our public school officials through existing statutes, executive authority, interagency and intergovernmental task force, and other extraordinary measures to ensure the safety of our children, educators, protect interstate commerce, and preserve the public school infrastructure. While local and state law enforcement agencies are working with public school officials in several communities to prevent further disruptions to educational services and school district operations, law enforcement officials in some jurisdictions need assistance, including help monitoring the threat levels. They need to spy on you. As these threats and acts of violence become more prevalent during public school board meetings via documented threats transmitted through the U.S. Postal Service, through social media and online platforms, and all around personal properties, NSBA respectfully asks that a joint collaboration among federal law enforcement agencies, state and local enforcement, and with public school officials be undertaken to focus on these threats. NSBA specifically solicits the expertise and resources of the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, the Secret Service, and the National Threat Center. Holy shit. All because parents are yelling at school board meetings. Regarding the level of risk to public school children, have you seen anything suggesting any of these angry parents have threatened school children? I didn't see it. Board members, facility, and campuses. We request the assistance of the U.S. Postal Inspection to intervene against threatening letters and cyberbullying. As these acts of malice and violence and threats against public officials have increased, the classification of these heinous actions could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crime. As such, the NSBA requests a joint expedited review by the U.S. DOJ, led by Merrick Garland, Homeland Security, along with appropriate training, coordination, intervention, and enforcement mechanisms from the FBI, including technical assistance necessary from state and local coordination with the National Security Branch and Counterterrorism Division. Additionally, the NSBA requests to examine the appropriate enforceable actions against these crimes under the gun-free school zones and the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism. Now, where's their evidence? Big claims, where's their evidence? Here you can see they start to cite things. These threats are actual acts of violence against our school district are impacting the delivery of educational services to students and families. As many districts receive federal funds and subsidies for service to millions of students with disabilities, health screenings, and supplemental supports for disadvantaged students, child nutrition, broadband connectivity, educator development, school safety activities, career and technical education, and more. School board meetings have been disrupted in California, Florida, Georgia, and other states because of local directives for mask coverings to protect students and educators. Let's check some of these out, shall we? So, for example, now remember, why is this important? That Merrick Garland admits, this is where I got my data for why we needed to intervene. Okay, so here's some examples they gave. A school board meeting was disrupted in California. Now, they're talking about using the Patriot Act to go after domestic terrorists. So I haven't read this link yet, but I assume that I'm going to click on it and it's going to be school board members threatened with some horrible weapon, right? That's what we're going to read, right? Protesters disrupt Poway Unified Board meeting, causing its adjournment. A Let Them Breathe rally that began an hour before the Unified School District's monthly meeting on Thursday night got so disruptive, the board had to adjourn. According to Sharon McKinnon, the founder of Let Them Breathe, what happened later at the meeting by individuals in attendance was not due to the organized rally, she says, and concluded prior to the later situation. The meeting was supposed to begin at 6. However, the live stream of the meeting was not started on time due to a disruption. At its peak, more than 70 viewers were watching on YouTube. 75 minutes later, the board briefly appeared on screen to adjourn the meeting. According to the PAIC, police were called to clear the room. She later released a statement saying, due to the disruption, the Board of Education meeting and concerns for the safety of well-being of staff and students, law enforcement will adjourn. As of Thursday evening, she said she did not know when the board would reschedule. At 5 p.m., mass choice rally outside the district was promoted on social media. She said the people that disrupted were carrying Let Them Breathe signs. a moment which was held throughout the country as opposed to mask mandates on campus. At 8:30, PAC released a statement. It stated, tonight, unfortunately, the Power Unified Board of Education was advised by law enforcement to adjourn. A small disruptive group forced their way inside the office, pushing past the staff. The group was politely asked to leave, but refused. The protesters not only prevented them from doing business, but prevented recognition of our hardworking teachers. That's it? That's the terrorism? That's what's cited. That's what Merrick Garland read. Because, I mean, surely no one thinks that Merrick Garland didn't actually read the sources, right? This is the data he's using. This is the data he used to say that the FBI needs to work against parents concerned about their children. Because violence and intimidation. Oh, really? Can you show us the data why you made that decision? Well, the school board letter. And then when you start to read the lengths, it's like, people got unruly and were shouting. That's it? That's the domestic terrorism? But wait. And this is where the rubber meets the road. By the way, if that's domestic terrorism, what about the women's rally? What about the people barging in during the Kavanaugh hearing? What about the climate change protesters the other day that were barging in federal buildings? FBI working on that? They looking into those groups? Oh, no. That's just peaceful protest. But shouting at a school board meeting, well, we have to close the school board meeting. Now we need the FBI to look into you. Again, when this was just the National School Board Association's letter, we could laugh and say, look, these people are batshit crazy. When Merrick Garland then said the FBI is going to investigate, we said that's very troubling. But when we found out that these are the types of incidents from this letter that made Merrick Garland make this choice, what are we supposed to believe? That's outrageous. But here's where it gets worse. Believe it or not. California, Florida, Georgia, other states. An individual was arrested in Illinois for aggravated battery and disorderly conduct during a school board meeting. 2 separate meetings in Michigan, an individual yelled a Nazi salute in protest of masking requirements. In other words, he was lying that they were being like Nazis. Another was because another individual prompted the board to call a recess because of his opposition to a critical race theory. In New Jersey, Ohio, and other states, anti-mask proponents are inciting chaos during meetings. In Virginia, an individual was arrested, and another man was ticketed for trespassing, and a third person was hurt during a school board meeting discussing distinguishing current curricula from critical race theory and regarding equity issues. Now let's go back and look. Awful lot of chat here. Let's see what they say. Meetings were disrupted in California, Florida, Georgia, and other states. 1 individual arrested for aggravated battery and conduct during school board meeting. Okay, that's 1 arrest. 1 arrest. Someone yelled a Nazi salute, saying that the mask requirements were like Nazis. School board had to call a recess. So far we have 1 arrest. 1. New Jersey and other states, inciting chaos. In Virginia, an individual was arrested. And then we go, other places there have been angry mobs. In Alabama, a guy calling himself the vaccine police called school board administrators while filming himself on Facebook. People sent letters saying you're going to pay for this. So 2 arrests. 2. Now, I'm Merrick Garland. I start looking through. This is the document that our Attorney General is looking at that says, oh boy, this document is so worrisome, I have to send the FBI to go after parents. Not because the FBI analysis determined that there were 73 arrests for terroristic threats to school board members. There were 22 arrests for aggravated battery of school board members. None of that. We don't have that sort of data. The FBI didn't compile that data. The DOJ didn't compile that data. Instead, they looked at newspaper articles in the National School Board's letter. That's what Merrick Garland testified to. That's where he got this information. So, okay, where's the data from the National School Board coming? Well, they cite a bunch of newspapers that say people were yelling really loud and school board meetings had to be shut down. And one guy was arrested in Illinois. Okay, that's one. And where's the only other person that was arrested? There might be a third later on, but 2 or 3. The only other person that was arrested was in Virginia. Now, let me ask you this. I'll ask the audience. If you're the Attorney General and you're deciding whether or not to weaponize the FBI to investigate people that are yelling at school board meetings, and your reasoning for coming to that conclusion is going to be this document, this school board letter, wouldn't you look into the cases they're citing? Wouldn't you? Especially those that led to arrest. That would be the very first thing as the Attorney General. If I was like, oh, okay, this is the only data I have, so let's look into it. Particularly, let's start with the arrest. Okay, this guy in Illinois, maybe he did something really bad. Okay, that's one. Now, clearly, one person doing something isn't enough to weaponize the FBI against an entire movement. Then there's another example, the only other example of someone being arrested. Wouldn't you look into that case? It's cited. It's cited as the reason that we need to treat people like domestic terrorists and use the Patriot Act. It's cited as one of only a handful of arrests, 2 to my counting. 2 arrests. This is the document, not some other document. That's not what Merrick Garland testified to. This document. It's not very long. It's 6 pages. Some of the pages are only half pages, see? Because there's so many. 6 pages. We read through the majority of it already. So surely, if you're considering using federal law enforcement to go after people complaining about what their children are being taught, surely you could bother to read the 6 pages in the citations if that's going to be your only data set, right? Surely you could do that, correct? Let's see what Merrick Garland says, shall we? Now, it might shock you to know that this National School Board Association, remember, in one of the premier cases that they're putting out to why these people are domestic terrorists, they cite this arrest in Virginia. Guess who that is? Well, that's the guy, Scott Smith, in Loudoun County, that was arrested because the school board was covering up the rape and sodomy of his daughter by a trans student. Now, they don't say that. Notice this article, the National School Board Association letter doesn't say, in Virginia, an individual was arrested because he was protesting that the school covered up the rape of his daughter. Nope. Why was he arrested? Because there was a discussion distinguishing current curricula from critical race theory and regarding the equity issues. That's what they put. So you would think that Merrick Garland would be familiar with this, because it's one of the few cases cited. Now again, let's say that 20 examples occurred around the country of people literally being arrested for attacking with physical violence or threats school board members. Let's say it was 20. We don't have evidence of that here. We got 2. But let's say it was even 20. Is that enough to weaponize the FBI? If so, if we could find 20 examples of threats or violence from Antifa members, then surely the FBI would be on the case, right? Oh no, wait, they don't do that. They don't do that. That's just an idea. Who's the central? There's no central leadership of Antifa. Cool. What's the central leadership of the parents protesting school board meetings? Oh, there's no central leadership? And yet the FBI is on the case. Isn't that weird? And so, this gentleman in Loudoun County was arrested. His daughter raped and sodomized. The school covered it up. And yet he is being used as an example in a letter from the National School Board Association that is cited by Merrick Garland as a reason for FBI involvement and going after other concerned parents. Imagine that. Imagine not only suffering the indignity of your daughter being raped, the school covering it up, but then the fact that you got pissed off and arrested being used as an excuse to go after other concerned parents. That's what's going on with this guy right now. And not a fucking word about it by almost everyone on the left. Where's their big heart now? Shh. That could hurt the trans narrative. Shut that girl up. Too bad she got raped, but no justice for her. Shut up. I can't think of anything more heinous. Let's see what Merrick Garland says about it, shall we?
aware that because Loudoun County prosecutors confirmed that the boy who assaulted this young girl in Broad Run High School is the same boy who wore a skirt and went into a girl's bathroom, sodomized and raped a 14-year-old girl in a different Loudoun County high school on May 28th. Are you aware of those facts? The boy was, are you aware further that the boy was arrested and charged for the first assault in July but released from juvenile detention?
This sounds like a state case, and I'm not familiar with it. I'm sorry.
Do you agree with Loudoun parents who said it is not okay to allow a child that has been charged with a rape to go back into a school in that public school system?
Again, I don't know any of the facts of this case, but the way you put it, it certainly sounds like I would agree with you. But I don't know the facts of the case.
Is the FBI or the Department of Justice investigating the Loudoun School Board for violating civil rights or under authority of, say, the Violence Against Women Act?
I don't believe so, but I don't know the answer to that.
I'd ask why not, because on June 22nd at a school board meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia, the superintendent, Scott Ziegler, declared in front of the father of the girl who had been raped that the predator, transgender student, or person simply does not exist. And that to his knowledge, we don't have any records of assaults occurring in our restrooms. When this statement bothered the father of the girl, I'm a father of a daughter, I believe you are too, sir, the girl who had been raped, sodomized in the bathroom of a high school by a dude wearing a skirt, that father reacted. Now, that father reacted by simply using a derogatory word. Would that statement have bothered you if your daughter had been raped, if somebody said that it didn't occur?
Again, I don't know anything about the facts of this case, but derogatory words are not what my memorandum is about.
Well, the victim's mother is heard on a cell phone video telling the crowd what happened. My child was raped at school, she said. Behind her, the victim's father is seen being arrested, bloodied. This man, this arrest of a 48-year-old plumber, became the poster boy for the new domestic terrorism the Biden administration, the administration in which you serve, has concocted to destroy anyone who gets in the way.
How infuriating is that? He doesn't know. Merrick Garland doesn't know. He doesn't know. He says, that's not what my memorandum's about. Why did he craft the memorandum? Does anyone remember? You want me to refresh your memory? Where was the data that Merrick Garland got that forced him to craft this memorandum? Shall we go back?
First sentence of your memo, very first sentence, you said, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence.
Yes.
When did you first review the data showing this so-called disturbing uptick?
So I read the letter, and we have been seeing over time threats.
Whoa. I didn't ask you. So you read the letter. That's your source?
So let me be clear. This is not a prosecution or an investigation.
Is there some study, some effort, some investigation someone did that said there's been a disturbing uptick, or you just take the words of the National School Board Association?
Well, the National School Board Association, which represents thousands of school boards and school board members, says that there are these kind of threats. When we read in the newspapers reports of threats of violence, when that is in the context of threats of violence.
The source for this, for the very first line in your memo.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Was the School Board Association letter.
Expired, Mr. Deutsch.
His data said his newspaper reports and the school board letter, which cited this arrest in Virginia as one of 2 arrests. And yet he doesn't know the details of the case. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. But wait a minute. I thought that you came to this conclusion because you were very concerned by the evidence that you saw in this letter. Now you're saying I didn't look at the evidence? I didn't look. I just decided to send the FBI. I didn't bother to look at the evidence presented to me. And secondly, on a different level, but also concerning, he says, no. We're not going after parents that got arrested for shouting vulgarities. Let me go back to the school board letter, which he cites as his reason for action. They say it's acts of malice, violence, threats against public officials. They've increased. Classification of these acts could be the equivalent form of domestic terrorism, they say. They're requesting expedited review by the DOJ, Homeland Security, coordination with the FBI. They're saying if they could be crimes under Gun-Free School Zone Acts and the Patriot Act in regards to domestic terrorism. Then they give the examples of the threats. School board meetings being canceled because people are mad in California, Florida, and Georgia. A guy got arrested in Illinois. A guy got arrested in Virginia. That's who we're talking about. It's clear that the National School Board Association thinks that these are the incidents that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security needs to be involved in, that the Patriot Act, that's what the National School Board Association is saying. They're saying this is domestic terrorism. We might need to use the Patriot Act. Here's our examples. This guy said bad words in Virginia and got arrested. Mayor Garland goes, oh, no, that's not what it's about. Oh, okay, then what's it about? Where'd you get, you're investigating something. Show us the document that's prompted your investigation. Well, it's this letter. Okay, that letter says that this is the type of shit that's domestic terrorism. So don't act all high and mighty. Oh, well, that's not what we're talking about. Well, you could excuse the American people for you saying that your reason for weaponizing the FBI is a fucking document that says that parents are domestic terrorists and cites a guy getting arrested for saying bad words because his daughter was raped and the school covered it up. Excuse them for thinking that you were overstepping your bounds. It's unbelievable. How could this guy admit this today? Why isn't this the biggest news story in the world? And then when it comes to, oh, here's something that maybe you actually could investigate. Actual powerful people locally covering up a fucking rape of a 14-year-old girl for political reasons. And you're like, oh, but that's a local issue. So let me clarify. If you're at a school board meeting because your daughter was raped and the school covered it up, that's a local issue. The FBI doesn't get involved. But if you swear at them, now it's a national issue and the FBI's involved. See? You see how it works? How can anyone justify this? Where's CNN? Where's all the Me Too movement people? A 14-year-old girl got raped. Where are they? The Obama administration said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but what is it? Title IX, right? Title IX was crafted as an idea that basically said colleges and universities had to have equal amounts of women athletics or extracurriculars offered as men's. So it sounds like a good idea, but a lot of times what it did was had the net effect of cutting men's sports programs. Because let's say you're a small university like the one I went to, Clarion University, and you have 10 male sports, wrestling, baseball, track, swimming, diving, whatever, right? But you only had 4 women's sports. So they were like, oh, we need to increase 6 more women's sports, but they couldn't find enough people for 6 more sports, so they only found 2 more sports. So now instead of 4 women's sports, you have 6, which means you have to cut 4 of the men's programs. But that was the idea with Title IX, and that's how it was actually affected. Am I right about that? Title IX is the name of it. The Obama administration famously sent a memo out discussing the Violence Against Women Act and said because universities were receiving federal grants and federal monies, that they considered it against Title IX and equal protection and equal opportunity for men and women if there were sexual assaults occurring on campus. And so if universities didn't comply and take this seriously, that they would cancel their federal funding because you can't get federal funding if you're not complying with Title IX. And so this had the net result of basically these inquisition courts all across the country where someone would get accused of sexual assault and the school would just be like, you're out. We can't give you the benefit of the doubt because we're afraid if we don't get rid of you and someone complains that we could lose all of our federal funding at our university. That was the federal government getting involved of the alleged sexual assault of people in schools. But an actual rape covered up by the school, that's a local issue. That's a local issue. How can anyone that defended the Obama administration's memo be silent right now? Where are the left-wing streamers? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I'm clearly not watching them right now. This just happened today. Merrick Garland. I'm sure they're talking about Steve Bannon being held in contempt. Any of them talking about this with Merrick Garland? Any? I hope so. If you find that anyone tonight, any left-wing streamer, was appalled and is talking about what was just done today in Merrick Garland's testimony, please send it to me. This Loudoun County story's been out for a while now. I haven't heard much talk of it. There might be people that say that's terrible. That's not good. Anyways, Ted Cruz went to Cancun. Matt Gaetz. 14-year-old girl was raped. And it had to be covered up. And a man had to be arrested. Why? Because it hurt their narrative. Couldn't happen in the United States, I was told. Couldn't happen. Wouldn't happen. Remember I talked about the grooming gangs in the UK? 30 years, underage girls gang raped over and over and over again. Law enforcement knew about it. Politicians knew about it. But they didn't want to speak up because they didn't want to be called racist. That wouldn't happen in the United States. That couldn't happen here. Here we are. But parents are pissed. Sure they are. And the Biden administration is going after those parents. And people will be mad. You know what they're doing? You know what they're saying right now? You know what? I'm pissed off. I'm going to eat an In-N-Out burger. They're against the vaccination mandates. I don't give a fuck what your politics are. I don't care if you're a socialist, you're a communist, you're a capitalist, constitutionalist, libertarian, or you're apolitical. We can't agree that it's bad to cover up rapes of 14-year-old girls? And then we're going to cite that when the dad is outraged. He didn't even attack someone. He didn't even get violent. He just cursed at them and got arrested. And the fucking National School Board Association cites that as a potential example of domestic terrorism. And the FBI and the Department of Justice is like, yeah, we're going to look into it. How isn't every single person, regardless of your political affiliation, infuriated by this? Instead, you know what they'll do? They'll clip the, oh, look at Rob, look how mad Rob is. Oh, his face got red. Yes, the dad got arrested. DuckDuckGo this. But let's go back to June when he was arrested. You could find almost every major national outlet reported this story. The meeting has degenerated. One arrest, one injury at Loudoun school meeting. The school board chair said in the closing minutes, "We will not back down for fighting for the rights of our students and our continued focus on equity." You get that? These damn parents that showed up, they had to arrest a man because the school board's fighting for the students and equity by covering up the rape of a 14-year-old girl. But it's about equity. There's that word, equity. Well, it would be unequitable to mention that this trans student raped a 14-year-old girl. So equity means we have to keep that quiet. One man was arrested, another man was ticketed for trespassing, a third person hurt at a public meeting Tuesday on equity issues. Parents fired up about the proposed policy and the treatment of transgender students, as well as how schools should teach about race, held up signs, chanted and sang. The school board unanimously voted to shut down the public comment portion after repeatedly issuing warnings about decorum. The meeting has degenerated, a school district spokesperson said. Parents chanted, "Shame on you," and raised their middle fingers. Some held signs that read, "We the parents stand up. Education, not indoctrinate." All these terrorists. There are two genders, male and female. Trust the science. Others indicated support for LGBT. Liberty and justice for all, no exceptions, except that 14-year-old girl that was raped, right? Scott T. Smith, 48 of Leesburg, was charged with disorderly conduct and obstruction of justice. The sheriff's office said he physically threatened someone and then continued to be disorderly with the deputy and resisted arrest. He was released. It wasn't clear if he had a lawyer. I don't know if the video's here or not. Let's see. Oh, these terrorists. There he is. There's your man arrested. He said some bad words after they covered up his daughter being raped. Terrorist, right? Don't worry, the FBI will be on him. Follow up to the story? Washington Examiners. School officials covered up his daughter's rape. Now the National School Board Association wants to make him a domestic terrorist. There he is. I remember people on the left watching them make fun of him. Look at him, his shirt's pulled up. Oh, he's a plumber. His daughter was raped and they covered it up. And I know they'll say, well, we didn't know his daughter was raped. Good, now you're outraged now, right? Now you've been reporting on it. You're outraged that Mayor Garland accepted a letter claiming that he was a domestic terrorist. You're outraged, right? Oh, you're silent. Tell me again about how you protect women. As far as injustices in the world go, the story of Loudon, Virginia man who became the poster child for domestic terrorism after his daughter was raped is pretty high on the list. Scott Smith was arrested June 22nd at a board meeting that was deemed an unlawful assembly after attendees voiced opposition to the proposed policy expanding special protections to transgender students. Smith was dragged from the event in handcuffs, his pants falling down, his lip bleeding. He was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Smith's arrest soon became a national story. The small business owner became the avatar of anti-school board protest, representing the unruly and ignorant anti-mask, anti-critical race theory, anti-transgender parents. What few knew until now is that Smith attended the June 22nd hearing to confront the school board members over his daughter's alleged rape in a school bathroom by a gender-fluid boy. The details apparently don't matter to the National School Board Association. In a letter to the White House this month, it actually highlighted Smith's arrest, an example of why federal law enforcement agencies need to investigate and prosecute parents who oppose mask mandates and the teaching of critical race theory. As these acts of malice, violence, and threats against public school officials have increased, the classification of these heinous crimes could be the equivalent of a form of domestic terrorism. The Justice Department announced last week it would mobilize federal law enforcement apparatus against school board protesters, saying it will investigate and prosecute as necessary. The NSB later even suggested the Patriot Act, which I've read to you. On August 17th, Smith was found guilty of charges and sentenced to 10 days in jail, all suspended contingent to a year of good behavior. Top prosecutor in the case, Buddha Bibaraj, who ran on the pro-leniency platform, also formed a fine and anger management training for Smith. Yeah, you'd need anger management if the school board covered up the rape of your daughter, huh? In an amazing turn of events for the father who simply tried to speak out after his daughter was raped and beaten at school. Smith told the Daily Wire on May 28th, a boy allegedly wearing a skirt entered a girl's bathroom at nearby Stonebridge High School where he sexually assaulted Smith's ninth grade daughter. The attorney's family, Elizabeth Lancaster, told the Daily Wire that a boy was charged with 2 counts of forcible sodomy, 1 count of anal sodomy, and 1 count of forcible fellatio related to the incident that day at the school. The sheriff's office confirmed via public records request the existence of the report, with the offense, forcible sodomy and sexual battery, matching the date and location of Smith's rape. Yet on June 22nd, during the school board's hearing on the proposed policy for transgender students, school board member Beth Bart states, quote, "Our students do not need to be protected, and they are not in danger. Do we have assaults in our bathroom or locker rooms regularly?" Superintendent Scott Ziegler responded, "To my knowledge, we don't have any record of any assaults occurring in our restrooms. Have we had any issues involving transgender in our bathroom or locker rooms?" asked Chairwoman Brenda Sheridan. Said Ziegler, "I think it's important to keep perspective on this. We've heard it several times tonight from our speakers, but the predator transgender student or person does not exist." Smith was arrested at the hearing in a heated exchange with the pro-transgender policy activist. Smith claims the woman accused him of fabricating the story of his daughter's rape, going so far as to question the girl's mental health. This enraged Smith, who then called the woman a bitch. This is when law enforcement officials intervened. A police officer grabbed Smith's arm, prompting the father to yank it back. A scuffle ensued. Smith was then forcibly removed and barred from the meeting. Loudoun County officials voted on August 11 to approve the transgender policy. Smith learned later his daughter's alleged assailant reportedly assaulted a second girl, even though Smith was assured that the relevant authorities were handling the matter. A teenager from Ashburn has been charged with sexual battery and abduction of a fellow student at Broad Run High School, the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office announced in a statement. The investigation determined of the afternoon of October 6th, the 15-year-old suspect forced the victim into an empty classroom where he held her against her will and inappropriately touched her. Smith's attorney said the suspect's the same boy. Smith said he called his probation officer and he told me, "Yep, I put him in juvie yesterday." The Smith family also said they contacted the Special Victims Unit detective, who reportedly told them, "I can't tell you what happened, but it happened and it's bad." The family said prosecutors have informed them the court date for their daughter's rapist has been moved back to October 25th to accommodate the two separate charges. There's much to this story, including the details of how left-wing groups conspired to slander and abuse dissenting parents. When you talk about injustice, it doesn't get much worse than the case of Scott and Jess Smith. Their daughter was raped and beaten. School administrators attempted to deal with quietly the matter in-house, and then school board members denied it even happened. Smith then was bloodied and arrested for speaking out, and the county's normally lenient prosecutor threw the book at him. The Smith family then learned their daughter's rapist allegedly sexually assaulted a second girl. Now the NSBA is using his tragedy as justification for mobilizing the federal government against concerned parents. It's insult on top of insult. Unsurprisingly, the ordeal has inspired Smith to get involved in local politics, something he says he rarely cared about until now. Hey, thanks for the follow. This has to be one of the most pissed off stories I've ever read. Their ideology says it's worth for a girl to get raped and to cover it up. Now a second girl got assaulted. Then they arrest the guy. Left-wing groups say he's a liar. His daughter's lying. Hashtag believe all women. Except that 14-year-old girl. Sorry, you didn't get raped by a white male Trump supporter, so we have to call you a liar. All the compassionate left. Where are they at today? Where's the streamers? Where's the New York Times? Rachel Maddow talking about this today? Merrick Garland is weaponizing the FBI over concerned parents based on a document that cites 2 arrests that's used as the example for why this is domestic terrorism. One of them was a man who was arrested for using the word bitch because his daughter was raped and it was covered up. That's domestic terrorism that justifies the FBI getting involved. This is occurring in Virginia, where the incumbent governor, in a debate, said parents don't have the right to be involved in their children's education curriculum. See, speaking up, has McAuliffe spoke up about this? About a school board in his state covering up a rape because it was politically inconvenient? If you were worried, let's say you're a trans activist. Let's say you're someone who's for, we should allow trans people to use the restroom of their choice in schools. Do you think that it's helping your cause? That they're covering up when a trans boy raped someone? You think that helps your cause? Oh, that doesn't happen. That'll never happen. That's what they said. We're not seeing, like, assaults occurring in the bathroom. Oh, no, there's no record of that. What about that 14-year-old that was raped? Shut that terrorist up! Bigot! That girl was lying! Get him out of here! It's not just the media, though, William. Look, I only know one leftist that's in the chat right now. Key Lime, I think, still in here. I'm willing to bet. If I ask Key Lime right now, I see you just typed something, but if I ask Key Lime right now, I bet he's infuriated about this. I know my left-wing friends would be. Has nothing to do with politics. Nothing. But how many people on the left are like, I'm not going to talk about that. I don't don't think they wanted this girl raped. I'm not saying that. But they're willing to say, let's just shut up about the story. It goes against our narrative. We don't want to talk about it. Not just goes against the narrative on the trans issues. Not just goes against, but even further, goes against the narrative on we need the FBI to get involved in looking at parents at school board meetings. All of this story was horrible before today, and now we found out the reason the FBI got involved wasn't because the FBI did a bunch of research and compiled a bunch of statistics of domestic terrorist acts that were occurring against school board members and teachers. Nope, they didn't do that. They took this letter at face value. Okay, what does this letter say were acts of domestic terrorism? Well, several school board meetings were shut down early because people were yelling. And this guy got arrested because he called a woman a bitch because the school was covering up the rape of his daughter. That's domestic terrorism. Where are they at? Where's the mainstream media? Where's the left-wing people? Where are they at? They care. They care about women. They care about sexual assault and violence and shit, right? Right? Oh, not when it hurts their political cause. Heline says the allegations against the same child are from two different people at two different schools. Yes. Well, nothing is certain. I'm inclined to believe the victim. Also, who cares about the perpetrator's gender? Rape is rape. Because they care about the perpetrator's gender. That's why it wasn't reported. I'll guarantee if it was just a boy that walked into the girl's room and raped her, they wouldn't have had the need to cover it up. You read the actual quotes why this guy was getting so pissed off. Because there was a discussion about whether or not to allow transgender people to use the bathroom of their choice. Something that the school ultimately voted to allow. People were saying there could be sexual assaults if you leave biological males in the girls' rooms. And the school board lied and said, no, that couldn't happen, and it certainly hasn't happened when it did happen. That's why it matters. That's why it was covered up. That's why it was able to happen. It's about the cops, Key Lime says. Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree, W. What are they unwilling to do? If you're willing to cover up the rape and sodomy of a 14-year-old girl, what are you not willing to do for your ideology? Can you think of anything more heinous? If you're willing to allow the Attorney General to say, yes, we need to mobilize the FBI to go after parents. And one of the big examples of why is because a guy used the word bitch when he was pissed that the school board was covering up the rape of his daughter. I'd be shocked if any of the Twitch streamers on the left that I've ever been on a panel with, I'd be shocked if any of them came out today and said what Merrick Garland did was outrageous. What the National School Board Association did, including this guy's story as an example of potential domestic terrorism, is outrageous. I'd be shocked. Maybe they will. But I bet not. But they're going to tell you how much more moral they are than you. I know. That is... I do apologize for saying Keyline would be reasonable about this. I should have known better. Actually not. Deflect. I don't know what the gender did. Deflect. That's what Keyline will do. So, I'm not getting baited into it. There's Merrick Garland. Just so happens, most of these parents that are pissed off, probably not Biden supporters. Just so happens we're mobilizing the FBI against them. Just so happens. No one gives a shit. Believe it or not, I have one other story to